alone on Avalon, or at all costs. Slowly, the atmospheric equalization process made it safe to open the airlock. After several eternities, the iris opened to let the brilliant lemon light of the star of their new world, now called Avalon, as it began to slip above the horizon. This team of 5 battle-hardened Marines were not prepared to settle a new world. They weren't pioneers or settlers or anything of the kind. None of them had ever wanted to try to be a colonist. That kind of life was just simply not in their wheelhouse. They were only here due to a sequence of luckless circumstances and a calamity of epic proportions on their ship that had been their home for the last dozen or so years. Yet, even despite this, they couldn't hide their excitement. "Wow," Tristan gasped as she took in the alien world and all its naked glory. "Patchy static field surveillance footage does not do this world justice." Colonel Tristan Harper was the commanding officer of this team of MACOs, Hadrian's spear point. They had served the cooperative with distinction on countless missions and had never failed to kick ass. Tristan herself was above average in height and perfectly proportioned. On a new world, and especially in an unknown world, one never explored without a quality environmental suit. This was to keep the risk of strange new diseases to a minimum, and to protect the native flora and fauna from some of the weirder space sicknesses as well. Through controlled introduction and measured exposure, the new world could be opened up to be walked upon with no shoes, but that process took decades, if not more. To that end, she and her team sported the highest end, battle and survival ready environmental suits available. Frontline teams had to have the best. Their 1-mex or Tier 1 multiple environmental combat suits were marvels of engineering. Multiple levels of airtight, dynamically pressurized and reinforced polymers with compressed air tanks and filters and temperature regulators to allow exploration, fighting, and survival from vacuum to volcanic hellscape. With multiple redundancies, these suits were fully combat ready, even with damage ratings into the 90% range. All mechs had built-in hardpoints for blade, bludgeons, ballistics, tools, scanners, and most other assorted equipment the combat pioneer could need. The top tier was even equipped with semi-ablative contoured and replaceable plates that increased its survival rating multiple times over. And because they could be in many different environments, the suits even came with a chameleon mode. This was not a cloaking technology, that was impractical at best. This was merely the most adaptable camouflage possible, that could also be used to distinguish personnel when there were other than covert options. The suit would semi-permanently change the colors of various macroscopic color packs so that, if needed, even in emergency mode, it could operate in little to no power situations. Tristan's suit was currently in a digital camo mode with tiny squares of colors, gray, green, and desert brown in assorted hues. "Well, Colonel, the camera was merely a black and white feed, and it was barely functional after the crash," grunted Derek to her right. "Command never keeps escape pods up to date, even for the frontline troops. That would be admitting that you could lose. You know, Command, they never lose." Captain Derek Francis was the executive officer of the team, the second in command. Though he was a bit slight of frame and a bit less than assertive, he was very good at what he did. He was the technical specialist of the spear point. With a working knowledge of all forms of tech known, he could usually figure out new or alien tech with relative ease. While he could, and regularly did, put bullets into bad guys, he was far better at solving problems of a more cerebral blend. His one mech was patterned with a yellow, orange, and forest green palette digital camo.
Not to mention, interjected Maggie from Tristan's left, it has been night for the past 20 hours or so, and it's going to be a long day at this rate.
Captain Maggie O'Hannigan was not a line officer. She was a medic, and a damn good one, too. Every underway team had one, and every team was convinced that theirs was the best, though Maggie might actually be the best. She was bound by the standard rules of engagement to not command battle teams or act too aggressively in battle against other civs, but that didn't mean she couldn't protect herself and her charges to the greatest possible extent. As a combat medic, though, she was just as adept at taking life with as little suffering as possible, as well as saving it. Her working knowledge included most sapiens within the Coalition's border. Her one mech was patterned with red, white, and silver mini-squares, though she had a subroutine to change to a more appropriate battle colors should the need arise.
So, are we going to scout Avalon for an alpha site, or just stare at the pretty colors?
Sighed Ming from the back and right. Commander Ming Shihu was the combat specialist, the tank of the team. Battle-hardened and forged to a lethal weapon by a lifetime of practice and training with every form of weapon, and even without traditional weapons or weapons of any kind, she was a killing machine. During the crash, her left leg had been crushed by debris, which had done enough damage that the only option on the table in an escape pod was amputation just below the knee. Fortunately, one mechs were field customizable, and her fiery orange, yellow, and red suit barely betrayed her recent injury. Despite being pegged leg as a pirate, she was the most insistent on getting the mission done.
"You just had major surgery, Commander," started Henry. "Perhaps it would be best if you stayed and held down the fort, or—"
Lieutenant Commander Henry Deacon was the junior member of the team, but just as important as the rest. He was the comms and linguistics specialist. There was not a language he couldn't identify or a code he couldn't decipher. His one mech was black, white, and shades of gray, and was barely marred with any damage.
"Perhaps you should kiss my ass, Deacon,"
Ming scoffed as she pushed past the rest. Perhaps I should stay. He hoped he didn't look as fearful as he felt. Tristan took a deep breath and rolled her eyes.
"Let's stay professional, people. Commander, wait for orders, and LT, we don't know if we will meet up with locals or other pods. We will need our comms guy."
Ming had stopped and glared, with her hip cocked in a disgruntled obedience. Henry took a hesitant step forward, and looked as if he would say something else. Tristan preemptively cut him off. "Even if we didn't, we are the only ones here. A very small team on a very large, potentially very hostile planet. We can't split up right now. This isn't a horror movie. The pod will keep. We stick together and watch asses. We are professionals. Move out." She confidently stepped out of the airlock and past Ming, who fell into formation and stepped behind, as did the others. A pentagon of power.
"Just remember, people, Avalon's 70% more massive than home. Performance will be impacted,"
Maggie advised as she keyed in a command on her forearm computer to close the pod. The first time walking on an alien world was an unparalleled experience, especially if one was confident that they were the first to do so. Everything was just so different, so alien, yet because all life consists of at least some shared patterns, hauntingly familiar. An uncanny valley of infinite proportions. Though the damage left on the surface was substantial, it looked as if the fauna of Avalon was already working to heal the scar left by the crash. The plants were a strange and fascinating mix of late Devonian megaferns and sequoia-sized wood species. While there were smaller, more average-looking plants, they were clearly on the fringe of this world. There were more colors than could be named,
and more hues than imaginable. They were high on some mountains, and they could see that they were surrounded by more mountains and forests and plains, etc. Clear evidence of a geologically recent seismic activity. Intelligent life may not have had a chance to develop on such a dynamic world, which was a pity. Even during the day, the majesty of the heavens was oppressive. The two primaries of this star system, a larger rusty lemon and a smaller white dwarf, climbed to their zenith, where they would then start to hide behind the gas hypergiant around which Avalon orbited. Despite being a moon itself, Avalon had two potato-shaped moons and a hazy, bedazzled ring, just visible coming above the horizon. As they made their way into this brave new world, they were mesmerized by eagle-sized bugs and even larger birds, some with feathers, some without. Various critters fretted about, mostly trying to avoid the newcomers. Some were the size of mice, many were larger, and the sounds in the distance indicated even larger beasts beyond their line of sight. They all seemed to have 6 limbs, possibly an adaptation to the higher gravity. Caught up as they were with the new flora and fauna, they suddenly realized all the animals were now out of sight. "Hey, did anyone notice where everything went?" Derek spoke up as they entered a relatively open area. "Animals do tend to avoid the unknown," offered Maggie unconvincingly. "But the captain is right. We should see something." "Given the reoccurring themes of all ecosystems," Ming shrugged, unconcerned as ever, "either a fire or a predator is on its way." "Given those choices," Henry grimaced, "fire may be the lesser of the two evils. We'd be a bit hot and bothered, uncomfortable even, but these suits were made to take worse in stride. But fighting animals on a new planet? That is chaos we just don't need." "Noob's right on that," Maggie sighed. "But seeing what little damage the crashing pod did, my money's on Predator." As they took a closer look, silence enveloped them like an uncomfortable hug. Instinctively, they circled up with their backs to the center so that it was less likely something could sneak up on them. Drawing their Model DA-6150s, Dragon Armory semi-assault laser rifles, a solidly built weapon that could throw 61 pulses of coherent plasma light per minute into the area of about the size of a fist at 50 meters, with a charge capacity of 10,000 rounds. More rounds could be lobbed less accurately in full auto mode, but that was a mode Marines never used. A low rumble betrayed the approach of a massive stampede. The members of the Pentagon turned just in time to see large beasts looking like something between Komodo dragons and impalas, but the size of an overfed moose, thundering towards them. Even Marines can get startled. In fact, one should never get to the point that they don't jump at the danger sense. Their shots were not rushed, but measured. They easily took down any beast that might be heading towards them. They didn't want to risk getting trampled, but they also didn't want to hurt the ecosystem too much. Fortunately, like most stampedes, the beasts did appear to want to avoid running into things. After a flash of eternity passed, so too had the herd. "That was nuts," Henry grunted as the last of the beasts escaped from view. While they lowered their guns, they didn't holster them. In a breach of protocol, though, Henry couldn't resist taking a look at the fresh kills. Both he and Derek broke formation and went to the nearest corpse. "Guys, we're not done yet," Tristan yelled. "Back in formation!" Despite giving the order, she and the others slid over to cover them as they looked over the body. Knowledge was power, and they were curious too. The beast was fascinating, so large that they would never be able to move it without breaking it down. Even in death, its bridge cable-like muscles twitched and pulsed. "Fascinating as the corpse might be, we don't have time!" Ming called out. "Something caused that stampede and... Incoming!" While they had been distracted by the body, a great winged lizard had silently entered their airspace and circled ominously. Now, it dove down to claim the body they had been examining. All five scrambled to avoid being crushed, and awkwardly trying to aim while stumbling. "Hold your fire!" Maggie called out. While not a line officer, the team did listen when she made a decision. "He's not after us. Must be hungry." They stumbled into a position in which they could hide and observe its behavior. After a moment of investigation, to make certain it was safe, the beast settled into its meal. "That's a frackin' dragon!" Henry Whisper screamed. "Well, that's as good as a designation as any, I guess," Tristan shrugged. "This complicates things a bit, though. But if it doesn't see us as a threat..." The dragon was slightly larger than the already jumbo meal, but it was not alone. As the team observed, other, slightly smaller drakes of a similar red-orange markings made their appearances. Some looked at the team, but for the most part, they were ignored and left alone. They were all scaled and had no horns. Their pristine, leathery, and iridescent wings indicated these young drakes had had few battles, if any. Their movements were a bit wobbly. The primary drake was a bit more scared than the others, the young adult of the group, indicating they wouldn't get much larger. Guys, notice something odd about their behavior?" asked Ming as she stood up, all fear gone. "They are nervous, twitchy, as if they're not the top of the food web." "If they are not the kings of this dominion," Tristan started, beginning to look around, "something really dangerous must be out there." "Really? More dangerous than dragons?" Maggie scoffed. "The West feared dragons, not the East," Ming started. "Those are more similar to the Western dragons than Eastern dragons," Derek chided, "but they are neither. This isn't home, and they are kids." Before any more conversation could happen, a deafening roar knocked them back to the ground and shook the drakes hard. The dragons looked to the sky and assumed a more aggressive stance. They knew what was coming. While these weren't their kills, they wouldn't give them up easily. As drake calls filled the air, a massive shadow bathed the glen in pitch. "Might I recommend," started Ming, already backing away. "Run!" Tristan ordered as they all turned tail and made for the pod. As the titanic electric blue-purple dragon, 3 times the size of the original drake, landed, the drakes squawked louder, more urgently than before. Before the spear point could make it to the fernwoods, more red-orange drakes made their entrance. Some of these were more hardy than even the first, and more battle-hardened, but none were that much more massive than the first. They all started attacking anything that moved that was not their kind indiscriminately. Even altogether, the match seemed tilted for the electric blue dragon. Its scales were thicker than the drake's, and it had multiple bony, metallic-looking horns. There was no iridescence in her wings. This was an ancient dragon that knew how to survive. Her flesh was covered with diamond sapphire nodes that arced with electricity, even the clearly damaged ones. "I think it's a female," called Ming as she shot and dodged. "Clearly not the same pride as the drakes." "We don't know if the elements are different for the genders, or if she's nesting or not," Maggie offered. "That would change her behavior." "Survive first, analysis later," Tristan ordered. "Henry, on your 6." The drakes breathed fire. The dragoness directed lightning from the crystal nodes. The fire was like burning napalm and spread, igniting most of what it touched. While the lightning was not directed at them, the burst caused static on their comms and snow on their vids. And particularly powerful bursts caused the servos on their suits to spasm uncontrollably until their onboard computers could compensate. Though the super napalm fire spread quickly and was a few hundred degrees in the extreme of the suit's capability, The surrounding fauna refused to ignite for long. The sap and other fluids all appeared to have a flame retardant quality far superior than any man-made product. "Take out the nodes on the blue," called Henry after observing the Drake's preference for attacks. "Maybe if we take her down, the Drakes will calm down as well."
"Worth a shot," Tristan accepted the advice. "Defend against the Drakes, but attack the female. Go for the wings first. If she is immobilized, she will be easier to fight."
For the better part of forever, the team tried to balance defense against the Drakes and attacking the Dragoness, but to no avail. "Small arms can't penetrate that high," Derek yelled. "I think that we are just pissing her off."
"We've no choice. Fall back to the pod,"
Tristan begrudgingly ordered the retreat. Giving up just didn't sit well with her.
"We have PPCs. Use them."
The DA particle projection cannon, model Hotel 95, or DA PPC H-95, was the most powerful non-crew served weapon in existence. Using a core of americium-243, the weapon accelerates 10 positive charge atoms per shot, 6 shots per minute, accelerated to near light speed. The energy and heat of the weapon means one has to be careful when using it. Though it has slow rate of fire, the damage done by kinetic and ionic energies is off the charts, equivalent to standard crew-served and shipboard weapons. But the cores did wear out far quicker, having only 20 shots per charge core and limited recharges.
"Conserve your ammo and aim true. We don't have unlimited with the PPCs. It's not pure energy like our other weapons," Ming called out. "Make your shots count."
No one, especially a seasoned Marine, likes to retreat. But when there is no other choice, they do it like pros. It took some doing, but they finally managed to break away from the glen. For a short while, a few Drakes did try to follow, but their biggest threat was in the glen, and they had their own companions to worry about. So the team was soon alone on Avalon once again.
"PPCs barely scratched the Drakes, let alone Big Blue," Derek panted. "And they are the strongest weapons we have. Escape pods simply don't have heavy artillery." "But we don't need to worry," Ming assured. "Notice, we aren't being left alone. We are not food for them, and we are not, unfortunately, a threat either. Live and let live. That is the only way to survive this." "Coming from you, that's saying something," Maggie acknowledged. "And we don't have a choice. We are simply not the apex of this ecosystem. We have to avoid provoking them at all costs." "We can't just keep our distance," Derek shrugged. "We need to build a base. Now more than before. We need any leg up we can get to ensure agriculture, workspace, and habitation." "We can observe their hunting patterns," Ming offered. "Without knowing the seasons or anything else about the ecology of this world, we simply don't have time. Escape pods simply didn't come with that many resources," Henry offered. They all looked at Tristan. In times of crisis, it was always the leader that had to have the answers, even if they didn't. It was a skill and a talent built over time to be outwardly calm and think clearly, even as panic set in on the inside. Tristan had never faced a situation like this before. It was a worst-case scenario of epic proportions, and while nothing was ever truly no-win, she just didn't see a win with this. "This is the kind of thing not covered in command school. We are supposed to always have an edge, to be near the apex. We are not supposed to be so critically outmatched by nature. Sure, if we come across people, we can raid and negotiate for supplies and weapons, but dragons?" She thought aloud, hoping it didn't come across as being scared, as she thought. "We have no rules or regs to fall back on, no best-known practices. For once in my life, I have no idea what to do or any clue how to do it. But I know this team. When we set our minds to it, we can accomplish anything. We have already killed a god. We got these dragons. We just have to give it our best go.
one day at a time. Survive at all costs, or die alone on Avalon.